Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a late night insight video on a house that I have never done a video on Channel Ram yet, but that is obviously going to change tonight, and hopefully I am going to try every single thing that this guy has put out because I am absolutely positively smitten, in love with this fragrance. Actually, I would go so far as to say that this is the discovery of 2025 for me, okay? If this is any indication of what this guy can do, I am going to get my nose on every single thing he has done because I am in love with his work. The house is called Angelos Créations Olfactives, and today we're going to discuss a fragrance called Vetiveria Animalis. Vetiveria Animalis. And this came out in 2022, so now it's only February of 2025. So one thing that I will say is that while this may be the discovery of 2025 for me so far, it came out years ago. So this is not a new fragrance per se. It's newer, but this house is interesting. I know Angelos is sort of very close friends with Sultan Pasha in a way. I know that they have a very close relationship. I've just never smelled any of his work until somebody very kindly sent me a lucky scent dabber of this fragrance, and for the past couple weeks I have been just putting a tiny little drop. Actually, I don't even want to waste the juice because I love this fragrance so much. I'm going to do one more. I am going to do one more little dab just for you guys. So there you have it. You can see it, right? And I just dropped everything when I did that to show you. Hang on, let me pick this up so it doesn't fall. Uno momento. Apologies. Surprised we're still even running. Surprised my computer didn't cut off. Okay. I'll get all that later. I'm just going to keep going. Screw it. So, this is absolutely grade A work. I don't know what to say. I'm speechless as to what to say. Absolutely floored by this fragrance. And, you know, it was probably sitting in my samples forever. I just happened to pull it out and try it and say, what's this house about? And I'm like, wow, this is really something special. So it's probably, I would even go so far as to say that this is the best vetiver fragrance that I don't have a bottle of that I've smelled in my collection. Which is a hell of a statement, okay? But I would almost go that far. Say that this is the best vetiver fragrance that I have smelled that I do not own a bottle of in my collection. So first of all, it starts with this very beguiling but challenging and strange and weird and sort of almost like off-putting blend of aldehydes and vetiver, okay? And along with the aldehydes and vetiver, you're hit with this very decadent fruit. Now, they list plum and they also list cinnamon, okay? The cinnamon does start to make an appearance, I would say, within the first half an hour or so. You will get that feeling of, you know, that feeling that cinnamon adds where it just adds this sort of warmth to the fragrance, you know? This maybe sort of oriental style warmth, but it's offset with this very strange aldehydes and vetiveryl acetate, which is basically the number one vetiver or number one ingredient used by a perfumer most commonly. Okay, if you kind of listed them in order of use, vetiveryl acetate would be at the very top. All right, it's in things like Encre Noir and stuff like that. But he's mixed all types of vetiver in here. There's Haitian vetiver. There's Java vetiver. There's all these different types of vetivers mixed with the vetiveryl acetate. Okay. So, I mean, I don't even know how to describe this scent, to be honest with you, but it basically comes across as having this very strange, almost like dusty, sandy, like mineralic feel, right? You almost feel disoriented, you know, discombobulated, if you will. It reminds me of the trip. You know what it reminds me of? When I think I'm going to tell a story to try to give you like a feel for how this fragrance, how I might try to describe this fragrance to somebody who's never smelled it before. So when I was a child, we used to go on these family vacations to different parts of Texas. Texas is big. There's a million things to do and go and see. But one of the attractions that they had was this cavern. It was a very famous cavern in Texas. And you would go, and of course you'd go, and the tour guide would tell you all about the stalactites and the stalagmites. One's on the ceiling, one's on the floor, and you can see the water dripping in the same place over and over again, building this, this stalactite or stalagmite up. And it just makes you think about how long that process has been going on inside of that cavern. And it just, that feeling of being in there, quiet. And, obviously they have areas roped off where you can't go and stuff like that. But it just has this sort of cold, empty, lonely sound of the water dripping and just hitting the same place over and over and over. And for the small amount of time you're standing there, it just really makes you think about everything. You start thinking, your mind starts to race, as you're sitting there watching this. You're watching this dripping of the water from the ceiling landing in the same space. And it gives you this mineralic sort of this feel of this, mineralic, dusty, earthy, sort of jaw-dropping like effect. It has this sort of what he's done with the vetiver in this fragrance is he's kind of highlighted all of the different facets. Okay, so on one side, if you can imagine actually going down into the cavern, and before you go down, let's just say there's a field, and that field is perfectly manicured, okay? The grass is perfectly cut. It's obviously been fertilized. It has that rich green sort of color about it. I guess when I dropped this, it also messed up where the camera was supposed to be. How about that? We're doing this on the fly, baby. So there's sort of this... just imagine this perfectly curated like field off to the side, okay? And so while you're about to go down into the cavern, you notice that the field is just beautiful. Lawn is mowed, flowers around it, and if you can just sort of imagine the image of the fresh aspects of vetiver from that field as you're going down into the caverns, and you start to pick up sort of the citrusy, fresher, green, grassy. Imagine the type of vetiver that a house like Creed might use, that greener, fresher, grassy, citrusy, sparkly aspect of vetiver. That's all here. But then, on the other side, and this is where, it really goes into the weirder aspects, if you will, because on the other side, there is this dank... This is where it goes into the cavern, where you have that water dripping. And this is why I was hesitating on how to really describe it, because the vetiver actually describes it fairly well. So the vetiver, the darker, earthier aspect of the vetiver used here, gives off this sort of dank, rooty, earthy, soupy, vegetal, strange, weird, discombobulated, nutty, smoky. All of those descriptors would describe the darker aspects of the vetiver here. And also, most importantly, dry. This fragrance smells bone dry, For a fragrance where I'm describing the water dripping, I want you to imagine maybe a part of the cavern that doesn't get that water. And it hasn't for decades, millennia, It's just dusty, dry, like the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, right? But somehow you have to try to combine those two images in your brain if you're going to sort of understand this scent. It's the only way I can describe it, right? That cold, lonely feeling of the water dripping over and over in that same spot. Almost like Chinese water torture, right? And then on the other hand, you have this Dust Bowl level of dryness and almost desert, desert sandiness. And it's dry, it's pungent, it's ancient, just smells like something that's been here long before you, long before your father, long before your father's father. It just feels like it's something ancient and old and timeless. And one thing I absolutely adore about this scent is how you can smell all of these different pathways, and yet the vetiver is always there. So if you focus your brain on trying to smell the vetiver, it's there. I've got a 2-hour dry down here. Oh my God, it's fucking stunning. This fragrance is absolutely stunning. And but if you think about the vetiver, it will return. It'll come back to you. It never gets overtaken. It never gets overtaken by some of these other notes, which we'll discuss here in a little bit. Now, from the start, you will notice other things start to come into play very quickly, and there's so many different. It's like trying to imagine where a golf ball is going to land on a golf course. Imagine all the different points. It would be impossible to try to guess, right? That's how the notes in this fragrance come at you. And really what you will notice, even early on though, is you're going to notice leather, and you're going to notice civet, animalics of some sort. Not just civet. I guess that's not fair to just say civet. There is civet, but you're also going to get hyraceum and oud, okay? And even real white ambergris is in here. So there's like a quartet of animalic notes that can come your way, if you will. And if you blindfolded me and put this under my nose, I would probably say that this is a vintage leather chypre from back in the day, you know? If you told me that this was created by the same person, Germain Cellier, that created Bendy, or this was created by Jacques Guerlain or something like that, I would believe you. I would absolutely believe you. Like, if you told me that this is a fragrance from the 1940s, 1950s, 1910s, I would believe you. I would absolutely, I mean, you could convince me. And I've smelled a ton of vintage fragrances. This stuff is phenomenal. I mean, his recreation here is out of this world. Absolutely out of this world. And it wears like a leather chypre, but with a weird little twist. You know, that's kind of how it wears. So the floral notes here literally make me drool. I mean, they are so realistic, they make me drool. The floral notes, and I have to say, the floral notes in this fragrance abound. There are so many floral notes. So there's narcissus, carnation, damask rose, Bulgarian rose, muguet, Egyptian jasmine, absolute. And there's orris butter, which kind of wears like a floral, you know, it's got that powdery, papery, sometimes floral side. And it mixes with the aldehydic opening, okay? That it just seems weird. You know, it seems like someone put you in this cavern, blindfolded you, spun you around and said, go. And you just have no idea where you're going, you know? Like there's this off-kilter feeling to the scent. Like something has sort of, in a way, almost poisoned you, you know? Like you've been poisoned and you're not exactly sure of your memory kind of thing. There's this weirdness to the fragrance. And if you can just imagine, sort of going back to my image of being inside of the cavern, imagine in one of the corresponding chambers, there is like a collapse or something. And that collapse brings dust and debris and panic in your chamber. Imagine being underground and having a collapse in a chamber next to you. You would absolutely freak out, right? And so all of a sudden you're standing there and the air that you're breathing starts to be overtaken by particles, dust molecules, pieces of rock that have just collapsed into the earth and got pushed into your chamber. And if you can just imagine this sort of dustiness, like the air you're breathing just being seeped with dust. And it's just seeping into the air that you're breathing. So everything, your sight, your heart rate, all of a sudden everything changes. And all of a sudden you start to panic. The air all of a sudden starts to smell dustier, bitter. And it just seems to go to the back of your throat and get lodged there, and you start to have this almost like a panic attack kind of thing, you know? And if you can just imagine that feeling of thinking for a moment, I'm going to die. This cavern is going to be my tomb, you know? This is going to be my grave. And all of a sudden, the power of modern technology saves you, right? Cell phones, digging equipment, whatever it is, they end up getting everybody out. And all of a sudden you're sitting there and looking at that lonely water dripping, and you're thinking about life and death and who has the power over life and death. Is it us? Is it just some other power? Are we lucky? Is it happenstance? Whatever it may be. How come we weren't in this other chamber? If we would have been dead. And you can't stop thinking about these sort of things, right? How much power do we really have over life and death? And that feeling of conquering death, you know, appears to like sharpen your senses in a way. And all of a sudden, like someone firing a gun near you at you know, the start of a race, or popping a firecracker behind you and you don't know they're there kind of thing. It makes you jump, but it also opens up your airway. And all of a sudden your nostrils open up and you can start to smell. You start to smell things you missed before. And all of a sudden you sort of smell this like moss on the rocks as you're walking through the caverns that you missed. You notice some of the maybe wildlife that actually does live in the caverns that you just happened to miss before. Maybe there's some bats in there. Maybe there's rats or something like that. The animalics feel like they could easily be attributed to the wildlife, and when your nasal passages open, you just notice the texture, the depth of everything all of a sudden seems in 3D, and the animalics start to rise all of a sudden, and you start to smell the sweat on the person next to you, and you start to wonder, is he thinking the same thing you're thinking about? Because maybe you were there with like a tour guide or something like that. You know, you're part of a tour, so it's not just people you know. There are other people you don't know. And you start to thinking, the guy next to you is sweating his ass off. You know, you can see under his arms, you can see the sweat, and you can, and all of a sudden you can notice, you not only see it, you smell it. And it's funny because this sort of image popping in my head, when I smell a fragrance that really moves me, I don't have to think about something like this. It's not something that I'm all of a sudden just making this stuff up. It just comes into my head. That's what the power of a good fragrance should do. It should move you. I mean, you should literally be moved to an image, to a thought, to a place. And, you know, if you can just imagine the animalics rising in this fragrance, it's got real oud. Thai oud is, I believe, the type of oud in here, but don't quote me on that. And there's this ambergris, white ambergris, which can add a little bit of this halitosis-like feel. There's also hyraceum, which can have a mixture of castoreum, civet, and ambergris all together, which this fragrance basically has all of those anyways. It also has castoreum, in case I forgot to mention it. So it kind of has all of them. I think the castoreum really makes up the leathery aspect, but it's almost like maybe when when all of a sudden the chamber next to you had that collapse, the person next to you panicked and started to run and didn't realize you were standing right next to you and almost like ran into you. And when he did, you smelled all of the parts that when you're properly distanced, you miss. So all of a sudden his breath was in your face. You got this halitosis hit. You know, he was standing right there. You could smell his fear. And there's this sort of feeling of just being enclosed, you know, like an animal in a cage. And everyone around you, you can smell the perspiration, the sweat, the fear in the air. And the hyraceum, the ambergris, the oud, the castoreum does a perfect job of that. And I love the leathery touches, you know. The leathery touches throughout the fragrance are, I won't say soft, because, I mean, they're heavy enough where I might think a perfumer who made something like Bandit made this. It's so good. And, you know, the dry down starts to turn crystal smooth is the crazy part about it. So, and the Vetiver is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. The Tolu Balsam, the vanilla, it's like at the end of your journey, you found like a jewel. Like all of a sudden you found the Queen's Diamond or some crazy thing. You found this unbelievable jewel underground. And that's what this fragrance takes you on. It takes you on a journey, like a treasure at the end of the journey. Now, this story that I came up with is loosely based on the story of Djedi by Guerlain, okay? Djedi by Guerlain came out in 1926. It is the only fragrance I've ever smelled that has any sort of comparison to this. Vetiveria Animalis, in my opinion, is heavily inspired by Djedi. My guess is that maybe he smelled this at the museum where they keep all the fragrances, which I can't remember the name all of a sudden. Someone will leave it in the comments and I'll be like, duh. At the Osmotech, sorry. Or maybe he has a bottle or smelled it from a friend or something like that. But this fragrance has to be inspired by Djedi. Never smelled anything else like Djedi in my life until I smelled this. And actually, I'm going to go one step further and say I think I like this more than Djedi. At least the sample of Djedi that I got, which I think the sample that I got was the 1996 re-release. So I don't think it had the same civet and animalic notes as the original. I think Guerlain was trying to kind of soften it up. Obviously, the story of Djedi and what the story I told are two completely different stories, but they both have that image of life and death, of you know, life being in this perfect balance, of you know, the potential of coming back from the dead. There are all of these images in Djedi's story, and it's an amazing story, by the way. Guerlain Guerlain, I mean, when you look at some of the stuff they did back in the day, Mitsuko had an amazing story tied to it. Shalimar had one of my all-time favorite stories to it. Djedi has an unbelievable story to it, and they would tell these stories and build a fragrance around it. And God, I wish they could do that today, you know? And you know, forget trying to do 15 releases a year. Just do one release a year of the quality of Djedi or Shalimar or Mitsuko, and they would have more than a loyal following still, instead of LVMH trying to figure out how to suck the last little bit of blood out of them before they sell them potentially, you know? It's frustrating, but anyways, Djedi, if you're one of the lucky people to have gotten to smell Djedi, this is the closest thing. And if you're not, and you want to smell Djedi, I would tell you, forget spending $5,000 on Djedi. Just get yourself this. Now, obviously, they're not the same, but they are at least cousins or close enough in a way where this is 30 mils for 205 euros. Okay? Much more realistic than the guy trying to sell his 1996 bottle on eBay for $5,000 of Djedi. Okay? And I love this stuff. And I don't own a bottle of Djedi, although I want to. It would be one of those centerpieces, you know, like to say you have a bottle of Djedi is like to say you have some rare baseball card that all the collectors want kind of thing. But honestly, I would just have this. I would just have a bottle of this. So my eyes just went to this brand. So Angelos, Creative Olfactives, you have the ram smitten. I am definitely ready to smell more work from you, sir. So anyways, if you guys have familiar with this guy's work, do let me know. Apparently this is not IFRA compliant, which good for him. And I love the way he writes it up on the website. He says, some ingredient proportions might slightly exceed IFRA category 4 standards and thresholds for potential allergens in this category. Regardless, all ingredients used, naturals and aroma chemicals, are totally safe. I love how he just blows it for off. Like, I know I'm not compliant, but fuck you, and we're safe kind of thing. I respect that. So anyways, if you have not smelled this and you're a Vetiver lover, I would urge you to, and I want to smell more from this house for sure. So let me know what your thoughts are if you have experience with it. Let me know if you think it's as close to Djedi as I do. I think it's probably the only fragrance I've ever come across so far in my journey that is like Djedi in a way. So that's my thoughts. Love to hear yours. As always, it's a pleasure to get to do these. Thank you to whoever my perfume god person was who sent this my way. And I love you guys as always. Cheers. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.